I am Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, and I have faced armies, betrayals, and the weight of an entire kingdom on my shoulders. But nothing prepared me for the battle between my heart and my crown. This is the story of how I fell in love with the one man I could never have, how our secret nearly destroyed everything I had built, and how I discovered that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to surrender. This is the story of a love that defied politics, enemies, and even the gods themselves.
My name is Cleopatra VII Philopator, daughter of the Ptolemaic dynasty, chosen by Isis herself to rule the lands where the Nile flows eternal and the desert sands hold secrets older than memory. I speak to you now from my palace in Alexandria, where the Mediterranean breeze carries the scent of lotus flowers and the cries of merchants from 100 nations. I have ruled this kingdom through storms that would have broken lesser souls, and I have learned that power is both a gift and a curse that never sleeps. They say I am beautiful. Perhaps I am. But beauty is a weapon I have learned to wield as skillfully as any general commands his legions. My eyes are dark as the night sky over the pyramids, lined with coal and the ancient tradition of my ancestors. My skin carries the warmth of the sun that blesses our lands. And my voice, they tell me my voice can charm serpents and sway the hearts of the most powerful men in the world. I speak 9 languages fluently, for a queen must understand not just her own people, but all those who would seek to trade with us, ally with us, or destroy us. I wear the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, and the weight of it reminds me every day that I am not just a woman, I am Egypt itself, living and breathing. I am 28 years old as the story begins, and I have already survived attempts on my life, a civil war against my own brother, and the complex dance of Roman politics that threatens to swallow my kingdom whole. But this story is not about war or politics, though both will play their part. This is about the one thing I never expected to find in the gilded cage of my palace, true love. And not just any love, but a forbidden one that would force me to choose between my heart and my throne, between personal happiness and the survival of millions who depend on me. The man's name was Marcus Antonius Silvanus. He was not a famous Roman general or a wealthy merchant prince. He was a translator, a scholar, brought to my court to help facilitate communications with the Roman delegations that came endlessly to Alexandria. He had no power, no army, no fortune. He had only his mind, his integrity, and a smile that made me forget, for just a moment, that I was a queen. Our love affair began in secret, hidden in the shadows of my own palace, stolen moments between the endless duties of state. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, and in Alexandria, where every servant might be a spy and every ally could become an enemy overnight, our love became the most dangerous thing either of us had ever attempted. There were those who sought to use our love to destroy me, rival factions within my own court who saw my happiness as a weakness to exploit. There was Berenice, my cousin and closest advisor, whose ambitions for power ran deeper than blood loyalty. There was Ptolemy Keraunos, a distant relative who believed he should rule instead of me, and who saw my distraction as his opportunity. And beyond the palace walls, there were Roman senators who wanted Egypt's wealth, but not its queen, and who would stop at nothing to see me fall. So how does a queen choose between love and duty, between her own happiness and the welfare of her kingdom? How does she protect the man she loves when enemies circle like vultures, waiting for any sign of weakness? And how does she prove that sometimes the heart knows truths that politics can never understand? This is that story, a story of secret meetings in moonlit gardens, of coded messages and desperate choices, of betrayals that cut deeper than any blade, and of a love that refused to die no matter how many tried to kill it. This is the story of how I learned that being strong does not mean being alone, that being a queen does not mean sacrificing everything human within me, and that sometimes the greatest political victory comes from following your heart no matter the cost. But I get ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to a warm evening in the 3rd year of my reign, when a young Roman scholar walked into my throne room and changed everything forever. The evening air hung heavy with incense and expectation as I sat upon my throne in the great audience hall of the palace. It was the month the Romans called September, though we knew it as the beginning of Akhet, the season of inundation when the Nile blessed our lands with its life-giving floods. The hall itself was a marvel that never failed to stir pride in my heart. Columns of pink granite rose 30 feet into the air, each carved with hieroglyphs telling the stories of my ancestors. The floor was polished marble from the quarries of Aswan, so smooth it reflected the light of 100 oil lamps like a mirror of liquid gold. I wore the formal regalia that day, the Nemes headdress with its blue and gold stripes falling to my shoulders, the false beard of kingship attached to my chin, as tradition demanded, though I removed it when no foreign dignitaries were present. My gown was pleated linen so fine it seemed woven from moonlight itself, dyed the deep blue of lapis lazuli and embroidered with golden thread in patterns of lotus flowers and sacred cobras. The vulture crown of Upper Egypt and the cobra crown of Lower Egypt rested upon my brow, and around my neck hung the broad collar of turquoise, carnelian, and gold that had belonged to my grandmother. My arms were heavy with golden bands, each engraved with protective spells, and my fingers bore rings set with emeralds from mines that had been old when Rome was just a village of mud huts.
To my right stood Charmian, my body servant and confidant since childhood. She was a Greek woman of Alexandria, 2 years older than I, with skin the color of honey and hair that fell in dark waves to her waist. Her eyes were intelligent and missed nothing. She had saved my life more than once by noticing details others overlooked. She wore a simple white linen dress and a silver bracelet I had given her, and though her station was that of a servant, I trusted her more than any adviser. She had a sharp tongue when we were alone, and the irreverent humor that I desperately needed to stay sane amid the suffocating formality of court life. To my left stood Apollodorus, captain of my personal guard, a Sicilian Greek who had proven his loyalty through blood and steel. He was a giant of a man, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders like a bull and arms thick with muscle earned in 100 battles. His face was weathered by sun and wind, scarred across the left cheek from a Persian sword, and his eyes were the pale grey of storm clouds. He wore the traditional armor of my guard, bronze breastplate polished to a mirror shine, crimson cloak, and a short sword at his hip that I had seen him use with devastating efficiency. Despite his fearsome appearance, Apollodorus had a gentle soul and wept openly at poetry readings, which endeared him to me endlessly. The audience that evening was routine, or so I thought. A Roman delegation had arrived to discuss grain shipments and trade agreements, the endless diplomacy that kept Egypt independent while Rome circled like a hungry lion. I had received a dozen such delegations this year alone. I prepared myself for another tedious evening of veiled threats disguised as negotiation, of smiling while Roman senators looked at my kingdom with barely concealed greed. The delegation was led by Senator Gaius Marcellus, a corpulent man in his 50s, with thinning hair and the florid complexion of someone who enjoyed wine far too much. He wore a toga with a purple stripe indicating his rank, and jeweled rings on every finger. His Latin was crude and his manners worse, but he represented powerful interests in Rome that I could not afford to offend. With him came 2 assistants, both forgettable men whose names I cannot even recall now.
and a younger man who immediately caught my attention. Marcus Antonius Silvanus stood slightly behind the others, as befitted his lesser rank, but there was nothing lesser about him. He was perhaps 30 years old, tall and lean, with the build of a runner rather than a warrior. His hair was the colour of dark honey, curled slightly at the edges in the Roman fashion, and his eyes, gods, his eyes were the deep green of the sea after a storm, flecked with gold. His face was clean-shaven, unusual among Romans who often wore beards, showing a strong jawline and a mouth that looked accustomed to smiling. He wore a simple cream-coloured tunic with a thin red stripe, marking him as a citizen but not nobility, and leather sandals that had seen considerable travel. There was something in the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant, intelligent without being condescending, that made me look twice. But it was when he opened his mouth to speak that everything changed. Senator Marcellus began his speech in painful Latin, but Marcus stepped forward and translated in Greek, so pure and beautiful it could have been composed by Sophocles himself. His voice was warm and rich, each word precisely chosen, each phrase perfectly balanced. And then, to my absolute astonishment, he switched to Egyptian, not the crude hieratic that most foreigners struggled through, but the sophisticated language of the Old Kingdom, pronounced with an accent that suggested serious study. Great Queen Cleopatra, chosen of Isis, beloved of Ra, eternal guardian of the two lands, he said, his eyes meeting mine with a directness that was either incredibly bold or incredibly foolish. Senator Marcellus brings greetings from the Senate and people of Rome, and wishes to discuss matters of mutual benefit to our peoples. I felt something shift in my chest, some emotion I could not immediately name. I leaned forward slightly, studying this unusual man who spoke my language with such reverence and skill. "You are well learned in languages, Roman," I said in Egyptian, testing him. "Tell me, where did you study our tongue?" He smiled then, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face, and I felt my heart skip a beat in a way that both thrilled and terrified me. "I spent 3 years in Thebes, Your Majesty, studying with the priests of Ammon. I have always believed that to truly understand a people, one must understand not just their words, but the thoughts and dreams those words carry." In that moment, surrounded by the grandeur of my throne room with 100 courtiers watching, I felt something I had not felt in years, genuine curiosity about another human being, not as a political piece to be maneuvered, not as a potential ally or enemy, but simply as a human being who might be interesting to know. The audience proceeded, but I found my attention constantly drawn back to Marcus. While Senator Marcellus droned on about grain prices and shipping schedules, I watched the way Marcus translated, noticed how he softened some of the senator's more aggressive demands, how he found diplomatic phrases where none existed in the original Latin. He was not just translating words, he was building bridges between cultures, smoothing rough edges, creating understanding where there might have been conflict. When the audience ended and the Romans were shown to their quarters in the guest wing, I found myself strangely disappointed. Charmian noticed immediately, of course. She saw everything. "The translator caught your eye?" she murmured as we walked back to my private chambers, Apollodorus following at a discreet distance. "He speaks Egyptian beautifully," I said, trying to sound casual and failing entirely.
Charmian laughed, that knowing laugh that had annoyed and comforted me for 20 years. "Yes, I'm sure it was his linguistic skills that made you stare at him like Hathor gazing upon Horus." I shot her a warning look, but we both knew she was right. There was something about Marcus Antonius Silvanus that had stirred something in me I thought long dead, or perhaps had never existed at all. In my 28 years, I had known power and responsibility, danger and triumph, but I had never known what it felt like to look at someone and wonder what their thoughts were, what they dreamed about, what made them laugh. My private chambers were my sanctuary, the one place in the entire palace where I could be simply Cleopatra, not a queen. The rooms were smaller and more intimate than the grand state apartments, decorated in soft blues and whites, with painted walls showing scenes of the Nile in peaceful times, families harvesting grain and children playing in gardens. My bed was piled with silk cushions, my writing desk covered with scrolls and tablets, and everywhere were the small comforts I allowed myself, a collection of interesting shells, a carved wooden cat that had been my toy as a child, fresh flowers changed daily by servants who knew my preferences. I removed the heavy crowns and collar, feeling the weight lift from my neck and shoulders. Charmian helped me out of the formal gown and into a simple dress of soft white linen. I washed my face, removing the elaborate eye paint, and for a moment studied my reflection in the polished bronze mirror. Who was I beneath the titles and regalia? What did I want beyond the endless duties of state? That night I could not sleep. I lay in my bed, listening to the distant sounds of the palace, guards changing watch, servants moving through corridors, the ever-present whisper of the sea beyond the palace walls. I thought about Marcus, about the way he had looked at me, not with the calculating assessment of most men who saw only a political opportunity, not with the fear and awe of my subjects who saw a living goddess, but with genuine interest, as if I were simply a person worth knowing. It was dangerous to think this way. I was the Queen of Egypt, descended from the god Ptolemy, and every action I took had consequences that rippled through the lives of millions. I could not afford to be distracted by a handsome face and a beautiful voice. I had enemies everywhere, both within my own court and beyond. My cousin Berenice had been dangerously quiet lately, which worried me more than open hostility would have. She was a woman of 40, daughter of my father's brother, with the classic Ptolemaic features, dark hair, prominent nose, calculating eyes. She supported me when I took the throne, but I knew she believed she would have been a better choice. She dressed always in severe styles, favoring deep purples and blacks, and wore her ambition like other women wore jewelry. And then there was Ptolemy Keraunos, the Thunderbolt, a nickname he had given himself with typical arrogance. He was my second cousin, a man of 35 years who had spent years in Rome courting favor with powerful senators. He was handsome in a cruel way, with sharp features and cold eyes, and he moved through the court like a predator, always watching, always calculating. He wore Roman styles rather than Egyptian dress, making his loyalties painfully clear, and he surrounded himself with young men of similar ambitions and flexible morals. These were the enemies I knew about, but in a court as complex as Alexandria, there were always others. Hidden rivals, secret conspirators, people who smiled to my face while planning my downfall. The price of the crown was eternal vigilance, and I could never forget that any moment of weakness would be exploited. So why, knowing all of this, could I not stop thinking about a Roman translator with green eyes and a voice like honey? The days that followed were torture. The Roman delegation remained in Alexandria for 2 weeks, negotiating the details of grain contracts and trade agreements. As queen, I was involved in all major decisions, which meant I saw Marcus regularly at official meetings. Each encounter was professionally correct. He translated, I listened. We spoke only of business, but I found myself noticing everything about him. The way he bit his lower lip slightly when concentrating on a difficult translation, the small smile that appeared when he successfully navigated a particularly tricky diplomatic phrase, the fact that he wore a simple leather cord around his neck with a small bronze medallion. I wondered what it signified, but could not ask without seeming too interested. I learned things about him in fragments. He had been born in Pompeii to a merchant family of modest means.
His mother had died when he was young, and his father had encouraged his scholarly interests, sending him to study in Athens and later in Egypt. He had no political ambitions, no desire for power. He simply loved languages and believed in the importance of understanding between different peoples. He had never married, which surprised me given his age. When asked about it by Senator Marcellus during one dinner, he had simply said he had never met someone who made him want to give up his wandering scholarly life. I was present at that dinner, seated at the head of a long table in one of the smaller banquet halls. The room was decorated in Greek style, with murals of heroes and gods, and lit by silver lamps that cast dancing shadows on the walls. I wore a gown of crimson silk, with golden snakes coiled around my upper arms, and a diadem of pearls in my hair. I had intended to be a remote, regal presence, but I found myself drawn into conversation despite my better judgment.
"And what do you think of Egypt, Marcus Antonius?" I asked, using his full name formally, though I was beginning to think of him simply as Marcus in my private thoughts. He looked directly at me, and again I felt that strange flutter in my chest. "Your Majesty, I think Egypt is the soul of the world. Rome may have its legions and its laws, Greece may claim philosophy and art, but Egypt has something neither possesses, a connection to something eternal and unchanging. Your civilization was ancient when mine was not yet born, and it will endure when empires we cannot yet imagine have turned to dust." The table fell silent. It was a bold statement, almost too bold. Senator Marcellus looked uncomfortable, uncertain whether Marcus had just complimented me or insulted Rome. But I understood what he meant, and I felt tears prick at my eyes that I would not allow to fall in public. "You speak as one who truly sees," I said softly. "Not all foreigners understand what makes Egypt eternal." "Perhaps because I have taken the time to look, Your Majesty. Most people see only what they expect to see. But if you look with open eyes and an open heart, the world reveals wonders." Was he speaking only of Egypt? Or was there a deeper meaning in his words? I could not tell, and the ambiguity was maddening. After the dinner, as guests departed, Marcus approached me with a scroll in his hand. Apollodorus tensed, hand moving to his sword, but I waved him back. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, bowing respectfully, "I found this in the library, a translation of Egyptian poetry into Greek that contains several errors. With your permission, I would like to correct it. I believe the original beauty has been lost in translation." He handed me the scroll, and as I took it, our fingers touched briefly. It was nothing, the lightest contact, over in an instant, but I felt it like lightning through my entire body. I looked up and saw in his eyes that he had felt it too. "Please do," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. "The library is open to you whenever you wish. If you require anything, you need only ask." He bowed again and left, and I stood there with the scroll in my hands, my heart pounding so hard I was certain everyone in the room could hear it. That night, alone in my chambers, I unrolled the scroll he had given me. It was indeed filled with errors. Whoever had translated it had completely missed the subtle wordplay and emotional depth of the original. But tucked between the pages was a small piece of papyrus with a message written in perfect Egyptian hieratic. "The lotus opens only for the sun, but blooms most beautifully in the moonlight, where none can see." I read it 3 times, trying to understand its meaning. Was it simply a poetic observation, or was it a message meant specifically for me? A suggestion that some things are most beautiful when hidden from public view. I should have burned it. I should have reported this inappropriate communication to Apollodorus, had Marcus removed from the delegation, ensured we never spoke again. Instead, I pressed the papyrus to my heart and knew, with certainty and terror,
that I was falling in love with a man I could never have. The next day, I did something I had not done in years. I went to the library alone, without guards or attendants. It was early morning, the hour when mist still rose from the sea and the palace was quiet. The Royal Library of Alexandria was one of the wonders of the world, containing hundreds of thousands of scrolls in a vast complex of rooms and halls. I knew exactly where the poetry section was. I had spent countless hours there as a child, escaping the pressures of being a princess. I found Marcus there, as somehow I knew I would. He was seated at a table near a window, morning light streaming over his shoulder as he worked on the translation. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he stood, began to bow, but I stopped him with a gesture. "No formality," I said quietly. "Not here. In this place, I am simply a lover of poetry, and you are a fellow scholar." He smiled, that wonderful smile that made something inside me melt. Then I am honored to share this space with a fellow lover of beauty. I sat down across from him, aware that every moment we spent alone together was dangerous, was wrong, was absolutely necessary. We talked about poetry, about language, about the way different cultures express love and loss and longing. We talked for hours, until the sun was high overhead and I knew I would be missed. As I rose to leave, he caught my hand, a bold gesture that should have offended me, but did not. "Your Majesty, Cleopatra, I know this is impossible. I know that you are a queen, and I am nothing, but I want you to know that these conversations have been the most meaningful moments of my life." I looked down at his hand holding mine, at the way our fingers intertwined so naturally, and I made a decision that would change everything. "Meet me tonight, in the gardens behind the Temple of Isis, when the moon rises. Come alone." He nodded, released my hand, and I fled the library before I could change my mind or do something even more foolish, like kiss him in broad daylight where anyone might see. That night crawled by with agonizing slowness. I attended to my duties, meeting with advisors, signing decrees, listening to petitioners, but my mind was elsewhere. Berenice cornered me after the afternoon audiences, her shrewd eyes studying me carefully. "You seem distracted, cousin," she said, her voice smooth as oil and just as slippery. She wore a gown of deep purple, almost black, with golden clasps at her shoulders and a heavy necklace of carnelian beads. Her hair was pulled back severely from her face, emphasizing her strong features. "You seem distracted. Is something troubling you?"
"Nothing more than usual," I replied, keeping my face neutral. "The Roman negotiations are progressing well." "Yes, the Romans," she said thoughtfully. "That young translator, Marcus Antonius, is it? He seems quite competent. Handsome, too, I suppose, if one likes that scholarly type." My heart stopped. How could she know? Had she seen something, or was she simply fishing, probing for weaknesses, as she always did? "I had not noticed," I lied. "He translates adequately. That is all that matters." Berenice smiled, a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Of course, cousin, that is all that matters." She glided away, leaving me cold with fear. If Berenice suspected anything, I was in terrible danger. She would not hesitate to use such information to destroy me, to claim the throne she believed should be hers. But even that danger could not stop me from going to the gardens that night. I waited until the palace was settling into sleep, then slipped out of my chambers wearing a simple dark cloak over a plain linen dress. Charmian knew where I was going. I could hide nothing from her, and she had tried to talk me out of it, but when she saw my determination, she simply made me promise to take a small knife hidden in my robes.
The gardens behind the temple of Isis were sacred ground, forbidden to most at night. But I was queen, and the priests knew not to question my devotions. The moonlight turned everything silver and strange. The lotus pools, the palm trees, the statues of gods and goddesses standing eternal watch. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and myrrh, and somewhere a nightingale sang its haunting song. Marcus was waiting by the pool, exactly as I knew he would be. He too had dressed simply, in a dark tunic without any Roman insignia. In the moonlight he looked like someone from a dream, unreal and perfect. "I was afraid you would not come," he said as I approached. "I was afraid I would," I admitted. We stood there, two people who should never have met, who had nothing in common except a connection neither could explain or resist. And then he reached out and touched my face, his hand gentle as a whisper, and I leaned into that touch like a flower turns towards the sun. "This is madness," I breathed. "Yes," he agreed, "complete madness." And then we were kissing, and it was like nothing I had ever experienced, tender and desperate and right in a way that defied all logic and political sense. When we finally drew apart, both breathing hard, I knew that everything had changed. I had crossed a line from which there was no return. We talked then, really talked, sitting by the pool with our hands intertwined. He told me about his childhood in Pompeii, about losing his mother to fever and watching his father work himself to death trying to give his son opportunities he never had. I told him about the loneliness of being a queen, about the weight of responsibility that never lifted, about the fear that I would fail my people and be remembered as the pharaoh who lost Egypt. "You could never fail them," he said with such certainty it made my heart ache. "You care too much. Think too deeply. That is your strength." "It is also my weakness," I said. "I care about things I should not care about, like you." He pulled me closer, and I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling safe for the first time in years. "Then we are both weak," he whispered into my hair, "because I have fallen in love with a queen, and that is the most dangerous thing a simple scholar could do." We met like that 3 more times over the next week, stolen moments in the moonlit gardens that became the most precious hours of my life. We talked about everything and nothing, philosophy and poetry, childhood memories and dreams for the future. He made me laugh with his irreverent observations about Roman politics, and I shocked him with the complex intrigues of the Egyptian court. We kissed and held each other, but went no further, both of us aware that to fully consummate our love would be to cross a line that might have consequences neither of us could bear. But secrets cannot stay hidden forever, especially in a palace full of spies and ambitious enemies. On the 8th night, as we sat by the lotus pool, Apollodorus appeared from the shadows. I leapt to my feet, mortified and terrified. If my own captain of the guard knew about us, then who else did? How long had he been watching? But Apollodorus did not draw his sword or arrest Marcus. Instead, he knelt before me, his weathered face grave in the moonlight. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "you must return to the palace immediately. Your cousin Berenice has called an emergency meeting of the council. She claims to have evidence of a plot against you, and she has demanded that all foreign delegations be questioned. I fear she knows about your meetings here or suspects enough to be dangerous." My blood turned to ice. This was it. The moment I had dreaded, when my personal happiness would collide with political reality in the most devastating way possible. Marcus stood, his face pale but determined. "I will confess everything. I will tell them it was all my doing, that I pursued you against your wishes. They can execute me, exile me, whatever they want. But you must not suffer for this." I grabbed his hands, desperate. "No! They will not execute you. They will use you as a weapon against me. Berenice will claim I have been compromised by Rome, that I am unfit to rule.
She will demand a council vote to remove me, and she will have the support of Ptolemy Keraunos and every other ambitious fool who thinks they could do better on the throne. Then what do we do?
I looked at him. At this man I had known for less than 2 weeks, but who had become more important to me than I ever imagined possible. And I made a decision. "We fight," I said, "not with swords, but with wit and strategy. Berenice wants to use our love as a weapon against me, then we will turn that weapon back on her. But you must trust me completely, and you must be willing to play a role that may be painful for both of us." Apollodorus cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, what are you planning?" I smiled, feeling the queen I truly was rise up within me, intelligent, ruthless when necessary, and absolutely determined to protect what was mine. "I am planning to show my dear cousin Berenice that she has greatly underestimated me, and I am going to prove that love and politics are not always enemies. Sometimes they can be the most powerful allies of all." The three of us hurried back through the dark gardens, my mind racing with possibilities. The real battle was about to begin, and the stake could not be higher. My throne, Marcus's life, and the future of Egypt itself all hung in the balance. But I was Cleopatra, chosen of Isis, and I had not survived this long by being weak or passive. Whatever Berenice had planned, I would be ready, and somehow, some way, I would find a path that allowed me to be both a queen and a woman in love. The night air seemed to whisper warnings as we approached the palace, but I squared my shoulders and prepared to face whatever came next. This was no longer just about stolen kisses in moonlit gardens. This was war, fought in the shadows of the throne room with weapons of wit and will, and I intended to win. The council chamber was blazing with lamplight when I arrived, still wearing my simple cloak over the plain dress. I had deliberately not changed into formal regalia. Let them see me as I was, unadorned and unafraid. The room was circular, with walls of white marble inlaid with blue faience tiles showing scenes of past pharaohs in triumph. A round table of cedar wood dominated the center, surrounded by chairs for the 20 members of my inner council. But tonight, only the most important were present, the ones who truly held power in Alexandria. Berenice sat at the far side of the table, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. She had changed into an even more elaborate gown since I last saw her, midnight blue silk with gold threading, and she wore the heavy collar of a high priestess of Sekhmet, the lion goddess of war. It was a deliberate choice, a visual reminder of her religious authority and her connection to the old families of Egypt. Beside her sat 3 of her most loyal supporters, elderly nobles who resented my youth and my willingness to negotiate with Rome rather than futilely resist. Senator Marcellus was there too, looking confused and annoyed at being summoned in the middle of the night. Marcus stood behind him, his face carefully blank, but I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and I tried to send him a silent message of reassurance, though I felt none myself. Apollodorus took his position behind my chair as I sat, deliberately choosing the seat at the head of the table, though Berenice had clearly expected me to stand as the accused. I arranged my cloak around me with regal precision, and looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "You have called this council in the middle of the night. I assume the matter is urgent enough to justify such drama." Berenice's lips tightened almost imperceptibly. She had wanted me flustered, disheveled, caught off guard.
Instead, I was composed and clearly in command. Indeed, it is urgent, Your Majesty. It has come to my attention that you have been meeting secretly with a member of the Roman delegation, meeting alone at night, in violation of all protocol and propriety. Such behavior raises serious questions about your judgment and whether you have been compromised by foreign influence. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some council members looked shocked, others knowing. Still others calculating how this information could benefit them. I let the noise wash over me, waiting, counting heartbeats, until the perfect moment to respond. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. The room fell silent. Berenice blinked, clearly not expecting this reaction. "Is all?" she repeated. "Your Majesty, this is a serious accusation." "It is not an accusation, cousin. It is a fact. Yes, I have been meeting with Marcus Antonius Silvanus. I have been meeting with him in the gardens of Isis at night, away from the eyes of the court. And do you know why?" I let the question hang in the air, watching confusion spread across Berenice's face. This was not how she had planned this confrontation to go.
"Because," I continued, "Marcus Antonius has information about a conspiracy within the Roman Senate, a conspiracy to assassinate me and install a puppet ruler who would be more amenable to Rome's interests. He came to me privately because he feared his own delegation might be compromised, and he believed his life would be in danger if his loyalty to Egypt became known to the wrong people. It was a complete fabrication, created in the 5 minutes it had taken me to walk from the gardens to the council chamber. But it was brilliant in its simplicity. It reframed everything Berenice thought she knew, turned my apparent weakness into strength, and put everyone in the room on the defensive. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, but he was intelligent enough to remain silent. Senator Marcellus sputtered, his florid face turning even redder. "This is outrageous. I know of no such conspiracy." "Of course you don't, Senator, because you are not part of it. But there are elements in Rome who believe Egypt should be conquered rather than befriended, are there not? Elements who see our wealth and wish to simply take it rather than trade for it?"
Marcellus couldn't deny this. Everyone knew there were senators who advocated for invasion. His silence was confirmation enough. I turned to Marcus, gambling everything on his ability to follow my lead. "Marcus Antonius, tell the council what you told me. Tell them about the letters you discovered, about the plans being made in certain quarters of Rome." For one terrible moment, I thought he would freeze, would expose my lie and doom us both. But then he stepped forward, and I saw the scholar's mind working behind those green eyes, creating a narrative that would support mine. "Your Majesty, honored council members," he began, his voice steady and convincing. "I serve Senator Marcellus as a translator, but I also have friends in Rome who keep me informed of political currents. 3 months ago, I learned that a faction led by Senator Cassius Maximus has been advocating for military intervention in Egypt. They believe the current queen is too independent, too intelligent to be controlled through normal diplomatic channels. They have been corresponding with someone here in Alexandria, someone who has promised to create instability that would justify Roman intervention." It was masterful. He had taken my desperate improvisation and woven it into something credible, something that would make paranoid council members look suspiciously at each other rather than at me. Berenice's face had gone pale. "This is absurd. You have no proof." "I have letters,"
Marcus said firmly, "hidden in my quarters. I did not bring them to official attention because I did not know who to trust within the delegation. But Her Majesty, in her wisdom, recognized the danger and has been helping me identify the traitor who was in contact with these Roman conspirators." Ptolemy Keraunos leaned forward, his casual pose abandoned. "These letters, they name names? They identify this traitor?" "They use code names," I interjected before Marcus could answer. "But with time and careful investigation, we will uncover the truth. In the meantime, I thought it wise to keep this matter secret, to continue our normal diplomatic relations with Rome while quietly identifying the conspirators. That is why Marcus Antonius and I met in private, to share information without alerting those who might wish us harm."
It was thin, almost transparently so, but it was just plausible enough to create doubt, and doubt was all I needed. I could see the council members exchanging glances, recalculating their positions. If there really was a conspiracy with Rome, no one wanted to be seen as sympathetic to it. And if there wasn't, well, I had still managed to turn what looked like a scandal into evidence of my vigilance in protecting Egypt. Berenice knew she had lost this round, but she was not finished. "Your Majesty, if this is true, then surely these meetings should have included your security advisors, your council. Meeting alone with a foreign man, regardless of the reason, creates an appearance of impropriety that damages your authority." "You're right," I said, surprising her again by agreeing. "I should have handled it differently, but I was trying to protect my people, perhaps too zealously? Moving forward, any further investigation will include appropriate witnesses. Marcus Antonius, you will provide Apollodorus with these letters first thing in the morning, and we will examine them together with members of this council." Marcus bowed. "Of course, Your Majesty." Senator Marcellus found his voice again. "I must protest this entire situation. Are you accusing Rome?" "I am accusing certain elements within Rome of treachery, not Rome itself," I said firmly. "Just as I would hope Rome would distinguish between the actions of a few traitors and the loyalty of Egypt as a whole. You, Senator, have always dealt with me honestly. I do not believe you are part of any conspiracy. But you must admit that there are those in your Senate who would prefer a weaker ruler in Egypt, yes?" He couldn't deny it without looking naive. He nodded reluctantly. "There are always factions in any government." "Exactly, and I am simply trying to ensure that those factions do not succeed in destabilizing my kingdom. I hope I can count on your support in this." It was a trap, and he knew it. If he opposed me now, he would look like he was supporting the conspirators. If he agreed with me, he would be validating my entire story. "Of course, Your Majesty," he said stiffly. "Rome values its relationship with Egypt." I stood, signaling that the meeting was over as far as I was concerned. "Then we are in agreement. Apollodorus will take possession of the evidence tomorrow, and we will investigate quietly and carefully. In the meantime, this matter remains confidential. I will not have rumors spreading through Alexandria, causing panic or giving our enemies, whoever they may be, warning of our suspicions. This council will speak of this to no one. Is that understood?" They all nodded, even Berenice, though her eyes promised that this was far from over. I swept from the chamber with Apollodorus following, leaving them to whisper and speculate among themselves. Once we were safely in my private corridor, far from listening ears, I nearly collapsed against the wall. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Charmian appeared from where she had been waiting, took one look at my face, and wrapped her arms around me. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I have ever seen you do," she whispered. Probably both, I admitted. Gods, Charmian, what have I done? Now I have to produce letters that don't exist, maintain a fiction that any serious investigation will expose. Then we make the letters exist, said a voice behind me. I turned to see Marcus approaching with Apollodorus. They must have left the council chamber moments after I did. Make them exist? I asked. Marcus nodded, his scholar's mind already working through the problem. I can forge correspondence that looks like it came from Rome. I know the proper forms, the seals, the handwriting styles of various senators. It will take me most of the night, but I can create documents that will support your story. That's forgery, I said. If you're caught? If we're caught doing nothing, we're already doomed, he pointed out. At least this gives us a chance. And besides, he smiled that smile that made my heart flip. Everything I said in there was technically true. There are senators who want to invade Egypt. There are conspirators in Rome. I'm just creating documentary evidence of what we know to be true. Apollodorus rumbled his approval. The boy has courage and brains. I like him, Majesty. Permission to assist with this forgery. I looked at the three of them, my most trusted guard, my dearest friend, and the man I loved, all willing to risk everything to protect me. I felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. Queens don't cry, not where anyone can see. Do it, I said. But we need more than just forged letters. We need to find a real conspirator, or at least someone we can plausibly claim is working with Rome against me. Otherwise, this will all fall apart. Ptolemy Keraunos, Charmian said immediately. He's been too quiet lately, too watchful, and everyone knows he has connections in Rome. If we could find evidence linking him to any questionable activity, then we could claim he's the traitor mentioned in Marcus's letters, I finished. But we would need real evidence, not just fabrications. If we accuse Keraunos without proof, he'll simply deny everything and turn it back on us. Apollodorus cracked his knuckles, a sound like tree branches snapping. Leave that to me, Majesty. Keraunos surrounds himself with young fools who drink too much and talk too freely. I have men who can listen in the right taverns, ask the right questions. If there's anything to find, we'll find it. Over the next 3 days, my little conspiracy worked feverishly. Marcus spent his nights creating elaborate forged correspondence, complete with worn edges, appropriate ink, and convincing seals. He was a perfectionist, rejecting anything that didn't look absolutely authentic. I watched him work sometimes, marveling at his skill and dedication, falling deeper in love with each passing hour. But we couldn't meet alone anymore, not after Berenice's accusations. There were always others present, Charmian or Apollodorus or both. Our conversations were necessarily formal, focused on the practical matters of creating our false evidence. And yet, even in those crowded rooms, with danger pressing close around us, I felt connected to him in a way I had never felt with anyone. Sometimes our hands would brush as he passed me a document, or our eyes would meet across the room, and entire conversations would happen in those silent moments. During the day, I maintained my royal routine with iron discipline. I held audiences, met with advisors, negotiated with Senator Marcellus about grain shipments, as if nothing had changed. But I was watching, always watching. I noted who spoke to who avoided eye contact, who seemed nervous or overly confident. I was hunting for weaknesses, for opportunities, for any advantage I could gain in the dangerous game we were playing. Berenice was watching me, too. She attended every public event, every council meeting, her presence a constant reminder that she was waiting for me to make a mistake. She had been outmaneuvered in the council chamber, but she was too intelligent to give up entirely. She was probing, testing, looking for cracks in my story.
On the third day, Apollodorus came to me with information that changed everything. He found me in the throne room listening to yet another merchant petition about dock taxes and waited patiently until the audience was over. When we were alone, except for Charmian, he spoke quietly. "We have something, Majesty. One of Keraunos' companions, a young fool named Lysander, was drinking heavily last night in a tavern near the harbor. He was boasting about how soon everything would change, how those who had chosen the right side would be rewarded when Rome took control." My pulse quickened. Can we prove he was speaking for Keraunos? "Better than that," Apollodorus said with grim satisfaction. "My men followed him when he left the tavern. He went straight to a warehouse near the eastern docks, a warehouse owned by a shipping company that does considerable business with Rome. He met with someone there, cloaked and hidden, but my men got close enough to hear fragments of conversation. They were discussing payments, arrangements for when the time comes. Did they see who Lysander met with? No, Majesty. But the warehouse is owned by a company that Ptolemy Keraunos has significant investment in. It's not proof that he's actively conspiring with Rome, but it's enough to raise serious questions." I thought quickly, weighing options. Arrest Lysander. Bring him to the palace, quietly, no public spectacle. I want to question him myself, and I want Marcus present to translate if Lysander speaks any Latin. If we can get him to confess to working with Keraunos, or even just to talking with Roman agents, we can use that to validate Marcus's story about the conspiracy.
Over the next hours, everything moved quickly. Lysander was arrested as he left his lodgings that evening, bundled into a closed litter, and brought to the palace through a side entrance. He was a young man of perhaps 22, with the soft features and weak chin of someone born to privilege and unused to hardship. He wore expensive clothes and too much jewelry, and when he was brought before me in a small interrogation chamber deep in the palace, he was already sweating with fear. The chamber was deliberately intimidating, windowless, lit by flickering oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on walls painted with scenes of judgment from the Book of the Dead. In one corner stood a statue of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, her ostrich feather crown seeming to watch the proceedings with divine attention. I had changed into full royal regalia for this, the double crown, the false beard, the golden collar, because I wanted Lysander to see not a woman, but the living embodiment of Egyptian law and justice. Marcus stood to my left, Apollodorus to my right, both silent and imposing. Charmian sat in a corner with writing materials, ready to document everything said. Lysander was forced to his knees before me, and I let him stay there while I simply stared at him, letting the silence stretch and his fear grow. Finally, I spoke. "Lysander, son of Nicias, you stand accused of conspiracy against the throne of Egypt. What do you have to say?" Nothing, Your Majesty. I have done nothing wrong. This is a mistake." "Do not insult my intelligence with lies," I said coldly. "You were heard last night speaking of how things would change when Rome takes control. You were seen entering a warehouse owned by interests connected to Ptolemy Keraunos, meeting with unknown persons in secret. This is not the behavior of an innocent man." His face went from red to white in an instant. I was drunk, Your Majesty. I say foolish things when I drink. It meant nothing." "Then explain to me what you were doing at the warehouse. Who did you meet? What arrangements were you discussing?" "I can't. I don't remember." Apollodorus took one step forward, and Lysander flinched. My guard captain was doing absolutely nothing threatening, but his sheer size and presence were intimidation enough. Let me be clear about your situation, I said, my voice soft but deadly. I know there is a conspiracy involving elements in Rome and traitors here in Alexandria. I know that Ptolemy Keraunos is involved. What I need to know is the extent of that involvement, the timeline, and who else is part of this plot. If you cooperate fully and tell me everything, you will live. You will be exiled, stripped of your property, but you will live. If you continue to lie to me, I will have no choice but to assume you are a primary conspirator, and the penalty for treason is death. Slow, painful death, carried out in the old way, in full view of the public. It was all bluff. I had no intention of torturing or executing this foolish boy, but he didn't know that, and the terror in his eyes told me he believed every word. "I will tell you everything," he gasped. "Everything. Just please, Your Majesty. I was only following orders. I never meant to betray Egypt." And so he talked, the words pouring out in a desperate rush. He confirmed that Ptolemy Keraunos had been in secret communication with certain Roman senators who believed Egypt should be brought under direct Roman control. He revealed that Keraunos had been promised the throne as a puppet king if he could create enough instability to justify Roman intervention. He admitted that several members of the court were being paid to spread rumors about my incompetence, to undermine my authority, to make it seem as if Egypt was falling into chaos under my rule. But the most devastating revelation came near the end of his confession. And Berenice, Lady Berenice, knew about it. She wasn't directing it, but she knew, and she did nothing to stop it. She said that whether Keraunos succeeded or you remained in power, either way she would benefit. If you fell, she would position herself as the alternative to Keraunos. If you survived, she would remain your loyal cousin, waiting for another opportunity. I felt sick. My own cousin, my own blood, had known about a plot against me and Egypt and had chosen to do nothing, to simply wait and see which way the wind blew. It was a betrayal far deeper than Keraunos' naked ambition. When Lysander had finished, I had Apollodorus take him to a secure cell. Then I sat back in my chair, feeling suddenly exhausted. Marcus moved closer, his hand hovering near mine but not quite touching. "You have what you need now," he said quietly. "Proof of the conspiracy. Evidence to justify your story. You can move against Keraunos, neutralize Berenice, secure your throne." "Yes," I agreed. "But at what cost? The moment I move against them openly, they will know they have nothing left to lose. Keraunos will appeal directly to Rome, claim I am executing innocents, try to provoke the very intervention he's been planning. Berenice will play the innocent victim, rally the traditional families against me, and somewhere in all of this, you and I will be destroyed." "Then what do you do?" Charmian asked from her corner. I thought about it, running through scenarios and outcomes, calculating probabilities and risks, the way my Greek tutors had taught me to analyze military campaigns. And slowly a plan formed. Risky, audacious, but with a chance of actually working. "I am going to do something unexpected," I said slowly. "I'm going to call a great feast 3 days from now. I'm going to invite everyone, Berenice, Keraunos, all the council members, Senator Marcellus, and his entire delegation. I am going to announce that I have uncovered the conspiracy and that justice will be served. And then, instead of executing the guilty, I am going to offer them mercy."
Marcus looked at me as if I had lost my mind.
Mercy? After everything they've done? Not true mercy, I clarified. Strategic mercy. I will exile Keraunos rather than execute him, which makes me look magnanimous while still removing the threat. I will publicly forgive Berenice, binding her to me with a debt of honor she cannot refuse without looking ungrateful and treacherous. And I will praise Senator Marcellus for his cooperation in uncovering the plot, which forces Rome to acknowledge that I am a valuable ally rather than an enemy to be conquered. It's brilliant, Charmian breathed. You turn weakness into strength, scandal into triumph. You look like a wise and merciful ruler rather than a tyrant, and you trap your enemies with kindness rather than cruelty. But it means we have to maintain our fiction about Marcus bringing me information, I said, looking at him. It means you will be praised as a hero of Egypt, someone who chose loyalty to justice over loyalty to Rome. It means your life in Rome is probably over. He smiled, that beautiful smile that made everything worthwhile. Your Majesty, I left Rome years ago. I have no life there to return to. And if I can be of service to Egypt, to you, then that is more than enough. I wanted to kiss him then, desperately, but Charmian and Apollodorus were watching, and I had already pushed propriety as far as I dared. Instead, I simply said, "Thank you, Marcus Antonius. When this is over, when we have survived this crisis, I hope we can find a way forward that allows us both to be happy." "I hope so too," he said quietly. "But even if we cannot, even if we must remain forever apart, know that loving you has been the greatest honor of my life." In that moment, in that grim chamber with the painted gods watching and danger pressing close on all sides, I felt something inside me shift and settle. I had been so afraid of love, so certain it would make me weak, but Marcus had shown me that love could also make me strong, could give me courage to take risks and make difficult choices. Love had not destroyed me, it had completed me. Now I just had to survive long enough to figure out what to do with it. The next 3 days were a flurry of preparation. Invitations were sent, the great banquet hall was prepared, and word spread throughout Alexandria that Queen Cleopatra would make an important announcement. Rumors flew. Some said I would announce a military alliance with Rome, others that I would declare war, still others that I would abdicate in favor of Berenice. Let them speculate. The truth would be far more interesting. On the night of the feast, I dressed with particular care. I wore a gown of white linen so fine it was almost transparent, layered over an undergarment of gold silk. Over this I wore a collar of lapis lazuli and gold so heavy it would have broken a lesser woman's neck. My arms were banded with gold serpents, my fingers heavy with rings. The double crown of Egypt rested on my head, and I wore the false beard of kingship. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw not just a woman, but Egypt itself, beautiful, powerful, eternal. The banquet hall was magnificent, a symphony of luxury that reminded everyone present of Egypt's wealth and power. Musicians played in galleries above, the haunting sounds of harps and flutes and drums, creating an atmosphere both festive and solemn. The walls were hung with fine tapestries showing scenes of pharaonic triumph, and the tables were laden with every delicacy imaginable: roasted meats, fresh fish from the Nile, fruits from our orchards, bread still warm from the ovens, and wine from vineyards as old as civilization itself. All my enemies and allies were present, arrayed in their finest clothes, wearing their most diplomatic faces. Berenice sat near the head table, resplendent in purple and gold. Ptolemy Keraunos was there too, trying to look casual but unable to hide the tension in his shoulders. Senator Marcellus and his delegation occupied places of honor, with Marcus standing behind the senator's chair, his eyes finding mine across the room. When everyone had eaten and drunk enough to be relaxed, but not so much as to be careless, I stood. The musicians fell silent. Every eye turned to me. "My friends," I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall, "I have called you here tonight to speak truth in a time of lies, to offer justice in a time of conspiracy, and to show mercy in a time when cruelty would be easier." I let that sink in, watching faces pale or stiffen with fear. I had come to attention that there are those both within Egypt and outside it who believe this kingdom would be better served by a different ruler, who believe that I, as a woman, as someone who values diplomacy over warfare, am weak and unfit to wear the double crown. Keraunos had gone very still. Berenice's face was a mask of careful neutrality. These conspirators have been in communication with elements in Rome who seek to justify intervention in Egyptian affairs. They have spread rumors, undermined my authority, and worked to create the very chaos they claimed to fear. Thanks to the courage of one man, a Roman scholar who valued truth over political convenience, I have learned the full extent of this conspiracy. I gestured to Marcus, who stepped forward with appropriate solemnity. Marcus Antonius Silvanus brought me evidence of these plots, risking his own life to do so. He is a true friend to Egypt, and I declare him under my personal protection from this day forward. Marcellus looked confused, but said nothing. I continued. I could execute the conspirators. I could have their heads displayed on the palace walls as a warning to others who might challenge me. That would be the traditional response, the strong response, the response everyone expects.
I paused, letting the tension build. But I am not a traditional pharaoh. I am something different, something new. And so I choose a different path. I turned to look directly at Keraunos. Ptolemy Keraunos, you have conspired against your queen and your kingdom. For this you are stripped of all titles, all property within Egypt, and all claim to royal blood. You are exiled, never to return on pain of death. You have until dawn to leave Alexandria. His face went white with shock and rage, but before he could speak, I shifted my gaze to Berenice. As for my cousin Berenice, who knew of this conspiracy but did nothing to stop it, I let my disappointment show in my voice. I choose to believe that you were conflicted, torn between loyalty to family and political calculation. I choose to believe that you would have come to me eventually. And so I forgive you, cousin. You will retain your position and your property, but you will also swear, here and now before all these witnesses, that you will never again remain silent when you know of threats to Egypt or its queen. She had no choice. To refuse would be to admit her guilt and treachery. She stood, walked to where I stood, and knelt before me in front of the entire assembly. I swear by Isis and Mot, by the Nile and the two lands, that I will always be loyal to my queen and my country. I swear I will never again remain silent in the face of treachery. It was a public humiliation disguised as mercy, and everyone in the room understood it. I had bound her to me with chains of honor and public oath, and she could never move against me again without being forsworn. I helped her to her feet, embraced her as family, and felt her trembling with suppressed rage and shame.
"We are stronger together, cousin," I murmured in her ear. "Remember that." Then I turned to the rest of the assembly, and my voice rang out strong and clear. "Let this be a lesson to all who would plot against Egypt. I am a merciful ruler, but I am not a weak one. I know everything that happens in my kingdom, and I will always, always protect my people, no matter the cost to myself." The feast continued, but the mood had changed. People spoke in hushed tones, reassessing their alliances, their plans, their assumptions about their young queen. And through it all, Marcus and I exchanged glances across the room, glances full of relief and love and the knowledge that we had survived this particular battle. But I knew, even as I smiled and accepted congratulations on my wisdom and mercy, that this was only a temporary victory. The real challenge still lay ahead, figuring out how to reconcile my love for Marcus with my responsibilities as queen, how to build a life that honored both my heart and my crown. As the feast wound down and guests began to depart, Senator Marcellus approached me with Marcus at his side. The old senator looked troubled. "Your Majesty," he began carefully, "I must return to Rome within the week to report on our negotiations. Given Marcus Antonius's service to Egypt, I assume you will want him to remain here as a liaison." It was the perfect opening, the solution I hadn't dared hope for. "Yes, Senator, with your permission, I would like to retain Marcus as an official translator and cultural advisor to my court. Egypt has many dealings with Rome, and it would be valuable to have someone who understands both cultures so well." Marcellus nodded, looking almost relieved. "A wise decision, Your Majesty. I will report to the Senate that Marcus Antonius has distinguished himself and service to both Rome and Egypt." After he left, Marcus and I stood together for a moment, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence. "You'll stay? Here, in Alexandria?" "I'll stay." He confirmed, "For as long as you want me." "Forever, then," I said whispered. "I want you forever." "Then forever it is," he said, and his smile was like the sun rising over the Nile, promising light after the darkest night. The weeks following the feast brought a deceptive calm in Alexandria, like the stillness before a summer storm. Marcus had been formally appointed as my cultural advisor and chief translator, which gave him legitimate reasons to be in my presence daily. We met in council chambers and libraries, in gardens with Charmian present, always maintaining the appearance of propriety, but the tension between what we showed the world and what we felt was becoming unbearable. I threw myself into the work of ruling with even greater intensity than before. The conspiracy had been neutralized, but the underlying problems remained. Rome's endless appetite for Egypt's wealth, the traditional families who resented my youth and my willingness to embrace change, the constant financial pressures of maintaining an army large enough to discourage invasion, but not so large that it bankrupted the treasury. Every day brought new challenges, new decisions that could mean prosperity or disaster for millions of people. Marcus proved invaluable in ways I had not anticipated. His understanding of Roman politics helped me navigate the complex negotiations with various senators and merchants. His knowledge of languages allowed him to catch nuances in diplomatic correspondence that my other translators missed. But more than that, he understood me in a way no one else did. When I was frustrated, he knew whether I needed advice or simply someone to listen. When I was exhausted, he found ways to make me laugh. When I doubted myself, he reminded me of my strengths without false flattery. We were falling deeper in love with every passing day, and it was destroying us both. One evening, perhaps 6 weeks after the feast,
I was working late in my private study. The room was small and comfortable, lined with scrolls and tablets, lit by oil lamps that cast warm golden light over the papyrus documents spread across my desk. I was reviewing grain distribution records, trying to calculate whether we had enough surplus to weather a bad harvest, when Charmian entered with a troubled expression.
"Your Majesty, you have a visitor. She insists it's urgent and private." "Who?" I asked, rubbing my tired eyes. "Lady Isetnofret. She says she has information you need to hear." I was immediately alert. Isetnofret was one of the high priestesses of Hathor, the goddess of love and beauty. She was a woman of perhaps 50 years, with the ageless quality of someone who had spent her life in spiritual service. She wore the traditional white linen robes of her order, and her head was shaved in the priestly fashion. Her eyes were dark and knowing, and she had a reputation for seeing truths that others missed. "Send her in," I said, straightening in my chair. Isetnofret entered with the gliding walk of someone accustomed to ritual processions. She bowed respectfully, but not obsequiously. Priests and priestesses held unique positions in Egyptian society, serving the gods first and the pharaoh second. "Your Majesty," she said in a voice like honey over stone, "forgive this intrusion, but I bring news that concerns both your personal happiness and the welfare of the kingdom." My heart began to pound. "Speak plainly, priestess. What news?" She settled herself on a cushion across from my desk, her movements deliberate and ceremonial. "The goddess Hathor has shown me visions, Your Majesty, visions of a great love that will either save Egypt or destroy it. Visions of a queen who must choose between her heart and her crown. I see a foreign man with eyes like the sea, and I see a choice coming that will define your reign." I felt cold, despite the warm evening air. "You speak in riddles, priestess." "Do I?" She fixed me with those knowing eyes. "Your love for Marcus Antonius Silvanus is known to the goddess, even if you hide it from the world, and it is known to others as well, those who wait and watch for any weakness they can exploit." "I have done nothing improper," I said sharply. "Marcus serves as my advisor, nothing more." "The body may obey propriety, Your Majesty, but the heart knows no such restraint, and love hidden in shadow grows twisted and dangerous. The goddess shows me two paths before you. On one path, you deny your heart, send Marcus away, rule alone as tradition demands. Egypt remains stable, but you become hard and bitter, and eventually your loneliness makes you vulnerable to those who would use your isolation against you. On the other path, you find a way to embrace both love and duty, but only through a trial that will test you beyond anything you have yet endured." "What kind of trial?" I demanded. Isetnofret shook her head slowly. "The goddess does not reveal all, but I can tell you this. Your enemies have not abandoned their plans. Berenice's oath binds her tongue, but not her ambitions. Ptolemy Keraunos, though exiled, still has allies in Alexandria and in Rome. And there are others, shadows within shadows, who see your youth and your heart as weaknesses to be exploited." "Then tell me who they are. Help me identify these enemies so I can protect Egypt." "They will reveal themselves soon enough," the priestess said. "What you must prepare for is not the identity of your enemies, but the choice you will face. When the moment comes, and it will come within the cycle of the moon, you must decide what you value most, your throne or your love, your duty or your happiness. And whatever you choose,
You must choose with your whole heart, for a divided heart will doom you." She stood then, preparing to leave, but I stopped her with a gesture. "Wait, you said Hathor shows you visions. Does she approve of my love for Marcus, or does she judge me for it?" Isetnofret smiled, and for a moment she looked almost young. "Your Majesty, Hathor is the goddess of love in all its forms. She does not judge love, she celebrates it. But she also knows that love without wisdom is as dangerous as wisdom without love. You are a queen, chosen by the gods to rule, but you are also a woman, with a woman's heart and a woman's needs. The challenge is not to choose between these parts of yourself, but to find a way to honor both."
"Were you writing to me?" I asked. He looked embarrassed. "Writing about you. I've been keeping a journal, trying to make sense of everything that's happened, everything I feel. It helps sometimes to put thoughts into words." "Read it to me," I said impulsively. "Whatever you are writing. I want to hear it." "Cleopatra, it's private. It's not—" "Please, Marcus. I need to hear someone speak truth tonight. Everything else in my life is politics and deception and careful words. Just this once, let me hear something real." He hesitated, then picked up the papers with hands that trembled slightly. His voice was soft as he read. "I am drowning in green eyes and ancient wisdom. I am lost in a love that should never have been, but feels more right than anything I have ever known. She is a queen, chosen by gods I barely understand, burdened with responsibilities I cannot fully comprehend. And yet, when I look at her, I see not a goddess or a pharaoh, but simply Cleopatra, brilliant and lonely, strong and vulnerable, fierce and tender. I would give anything to ease her burdens, to make her smile without the weight of kingdoms in her eyes. But I am nothing, a scholar without power or wealth, and my love for her is like a moth loving the moon, beautiful and hopeless, and inevitably fatal." I felt tears streaming down my face, all the emotions I had been holding back for weeks finally breaking through. "You're wrong," I whispered. "You're not nothing. You're everything. You're the only person in my entire life who sees me as simply human. Everyone else sees the crown, the power, the politics. But you see me." He set down the papers and crossed the room in 3 strides, and then we were in each other's arms, holding each other with desperate intensity. We kissed, deep and hungry and full of all the longing we had been denying. His hands were in my hair, mine clutching his shoulders. And for a moment, the world fell away, and there was nothing but us, nothing but this connection that defied all logic and political sense. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I pressed my forehead against his chest and said the words I had been afraid to speak. "I love you, Marcus. Gods help me, I love you more than is wise or safe or right, and I don't know what to do about it. I love you too," he said into my hair. "I have loved you since the moment you spoke to me in Egyptian in your throne room. I will love you until the day I die. But Cleopatra, we both know this cannot end well. You're a queen. You need to marry for alliance, produce heirs to secure your dynasty. I'm a nobody from Pompeii. Even if we could be together, it would give your enemies exactly the weapon they need to destroy you." "I know this," I said miserably. "I know all of this, but knowing doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make me stop wanting you, needing you, loving you." We stood there, holding each other, both of us crying now, both of us aware that this moment was stolen and precious and could never be repeated. Finally, reluctantly, I pulled away. "I should go," I said.
wiping my eyes. "Before someone notices I'm gone, before we make this even more complicated than it already is. Cleopatra, wait." He caught my hand. "Whatever happens, whatever you decide, know that loving you has been the greatest gift of my life. If I never touch you again, if I never see you again after tomorrow, I will still count myself blessed to have known you, to have loved you, to have been loved by you." I kissed him one more time, gentle and lingering, trying to memorize the taste of his lips, the feel of his arms around me, the sound of his heartbeat against mine. Then I left, slipping back through the dark corridors to my own chambers, carrying with me both the joy of his love and the terrible weight of impossible choices. Charmian was waiting in my rooms, her face anxious. "Where were you? I've been worried." She stopped, taking in my tear-stained face, my disheveled appearance. "Oh, my dear, you went to him." I nodded, collapsing onto my bed. I know it was foolish. I know I've made everything worse. But Charmian, I love him so much, it hurts. How do I rule a kingdom when my heart is breaking? How do I make decisions that affect millions when I can't even solve my own life? She sat beside me, stroking my hair the way she had when we were children and I woke from nightmares. "You do what you've always done. You find a way. You're Cleopatra, daughter of pharaohs, chosen of Isis. You've survived assassination attempts and civil wars. You can survive this too. But what if I don't want to just survive? What if I want to actually live? What if I want to be happy, not just powerful? Then you'll find a way to be both. Because that's who you are. You don't accept impossible choices, you create new possibilities." Her words stayed with me through a sleepless night. I lay awake, thinking about Isetnofret's prophecy, about Marcus's words, about the weight of the crown I wore, and the emptiness of ruling alone. And slowly, impossibly, an idea began to form. Risky and unprecedented, but perhaps, just perhaps, achievable. The next morning, I called an emergency session of my inner council. Only my most trusted advisors were present: Apollodorus, Charmian, the high priest Pasherenptah, Minister Demetrius, and Admiral Horemheb. Berenice was not invited. This meeting was too important, too sensitive to include anyone whose loyalty might be questionable.
"My friends," I began, standing before them, "I have called you here to discuss a matter that concerns both my personal life and the future of Egypt. I ask you to listen with open minds and open hearts, because what I am about to propose is unprecedented in the history of our kingdom." They exchanged glances, but remained silent, waiting. I took a deep breath and continued. "You all know that I must eventually marry to secure the succession, to produce heirs who will rule Egypt after I am gone. This is my duty as queen, and I do not shrink from it. But I have come to realize that I cannot make a purely political marriage, cannot give myself to someone I do not love or respect, and still remain the ruler Egypt needs me to be." Pasherenptah, the elderly priest, nodded slowly. "The old pharaohs often married for love as well as politics, Your Majesty. There is precedent." "Not for what I am proposing," I interrupted gently. "I want to marry Marcus Antonius Silvanus. I want to make him my consort, the father of my children, my partner in ruling Egypt." The silence that followed was absolute. Then everyone began speaking at once. "He's a foreigner," Demetrios protested. "He has no royal blood," Horemheb objected. "Rome will see it as an insult," another voice added. I held up my hand for silence. I know all the objections, but hear me out. Marcus is not some random foreigner. He is a respected scholar, someone who has proven his loyalty to Egypt, someone who understands our culture and speaks our language.
He has no political ambitions of his own, which means he would never try to rule through me or undermine my authority. He is intelligent enough to be a true partner, humble enough to accept his subordinate role, and he loves Egypt as much as he loves me. But, Your Majesty, Pasherenptah said carefully, marriage to a commoner, a foreigner, it will be seen as weakness. Your enemies will use it against you. My enemies will use anything against me, I countered. If I marry an Egyptian noble, I create jealousy among the other families. If I marry a foreign prince, I risk being seen as controlled by outside powers. If I marry no one, I am seen as cold and unnatural. There is no safe choice. So I might as well choose the one that makes me happy and strengthens me as a ruler. Apollodorus spoke for the first time, his rumbling voice thoughtful. The queen has a point. A consort with no power base of his own cannot threaten her authority, and if he truly loves her, he will support her rather than manipulate her. I've observed Marcus Antonius Silvanus closely these past weeks. He's an honorable man, intelligent and principled. I could support this match. Charmian added her voice. I have known Her Majesty all her life. I have seen her bear burdens that would crush most people. She has ruled brilliantly, but at a personal cost. If Marcus Antonius Silvanus can ease that burden, if he can give her the emotional support she needs to continue being the queen Egypt needs her to be, then his lack of royal blood seems a small concern. Slowly, one by one, the others began to come around. Demetrios pointed out that Marcus's Roman connections could actually be valuable in managing trade relationships. Horemheb suggested that a marriage to someone outside the traditional power structures might actually strengthen my independence. Even Pasherenptah admitted that the gods had blessed stranger unions in the past. But then the old priest added, Your Majesty, even if we all support this, you face a larger problem. The marriage must be accepted by the people of Egypt, by the priests in all the temples, by the Roman authorities who already watch us with suspicious eyes. And most immediately, you must announce it in a way that prevents your enemies from using it to destroy you before you can even celebrate the wedding. He was right, of course. The hardest part was not making the decision, but executing it in a way that turned potential disaster into triumph. I have a plan for that, I said, but it requires perfect timing and considerable risk. Here is what I propose. Over the next hours, we worked out every detail. The announcement would be made during the Festival of Isis, one of the most important religious celebrations of the year, when Alexandria would be filled with pilgrims and worshippers from throughout Egypt. The marriage would be framed as a divine blessing, revealed through prophecy and confirmed by the priests. Marcus would undergo a formal adoption ceremony, making him legally Egyptian and giving him a place in the royal house. The ceremony would be magnificent, a public celebration that would overwhelm any opposition through sheer spectacle and joy. But first, I had to tell Marcus what I was planning. That evening, I summoned him to a formal meeting in my throne room, public and proper, with guards and witnesses. But once he arrived and bowed before my throne, I asked everyone else to leave. Apollodorus hesitated, but I waved him away. For this conversation, I needed privacy. When we were alone, Marcus looked up at me with confusion and concern. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Your summons was so formal. Stand up, I said, descending from the throne to face him at eye level, and listen carefully, because I'm about to ask you something that will change both our lives forever. His green eyes searched mine, and I saw fear and hope warring in them. Marcus Antonius Silvanus, I love you. You know this already. But what you don't know is that I've decided I'm not willing to live without you. I've spent my entire life doing what was expected, what was necessary, what was politically expedient. For once, just this once, I want to do what my heart tells me is right.
Cleopatra, what are you saying? I'm saying I want to marry you. I want to make you my consort, my partner, the father of my children. I want to bind my life to yours in every way that matters. But I need to know, is this what you want? Because once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be trapped in the political world you've always avoided. You'll face scrutiny and criticism and danger. Your quiet life of scholarship will be over forever. He stared at me, and I saw a dozen emotions cross his face in rapid succession: shock, joy, fear, wonder. Then he smiled, that beautiful smile that had captured my heart from the beginning. Cleopatra, love, I left my quiet life the moment I walked into your throne room. I was already trapped the second I looked into your eyes. If you're offering me a chance to spend my life at your side, to be your partner in this impossible, beautiful, terrifying adventure of ruling Egypt, then yes, 1,000 times yes. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months, and threw my arms around him. We held each other in the middle of the throne room, both crying and laughing, both terrified and exhilarated. There's one more thing, I said, pulling back to look at him. For this to work, for the marriage to be accepted, you need to undergo an adoption ceremony. You'll be formally brought into the Ptolemaic house, given Egyptian citizenship and royal status. It's a lot to ask, to give up your Roman identity, your family name. My family name died with my father. And as for my Roman identity, I've spent more years in Egypt than in Rome. I would be honored to become Egyptian, to truly belong to the land I've come to love. Besides, he grinned, I've always thought Marcus Antonius Silvanus was a bit long-winded. What would my Egyptian name be? I thought about it, considering carefully. In Egyptian tradition, names carried power and meaning. Maryamun Silvanus, I said finally. It means beloved of Amun. It honors your scholarship. Amun is the god of wisdom as well as kingship, and it acknowledges your Roman heritage by keeping Silvanus as your family name. Maryamun, he said, testing the sound. I like it. When do we begin? Tomorrow. The festival of Isis begins in 3 days. We have that long to prepare everything: the adoption ceremony, the wedding rites, the public celebrations. It's going to be the most stressful 3 days of our lives. As long as they end with me married to you, he said, pulling me close again, they can be as stressful as the gods decree. The next 3 days were indeed a blur of frantic preparation. The adoption ceremony was performed in the temple of Amun at Karnak, with Pesheramta presiding. Marcus, now Maryamun, went through the ritual purification, the sacred oaths, the formal acceptance into the royal house. He wore Egyptian robes for the first time, white linen embroidered with gold, and when the ceremony was complete, he was legally and spiritually as Egyptian as anyone born on the banks of the Nile. The wedding was planned for the final day of the festival of Isis, when the goddess herself was said to walk among her people. We would marry in the great temple of Isis near the harbor, with the ceremony conducted by Isetnofret herself. The entire city would be invited to witness and celebrate. But on the eve of the festival, just when everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly, disaster struck in a form I should have anticipated but somehow failed to prevent. Berenice requested a private audience. She came to my chambers alone, dressed in simple white, her face showing none of the pride or ambition I had come to expect from her. She knelt before me with what appeared to be genuine humility. "Your Majesty, cousin, I have come to beg your forgiveness," she began, her voice trembling. I regarded her coolly, instantly suspicious. "Forgiveness for what, Berenice? You've already been pardoned for your silence about the conspiracy." "Not for that," she said, and now tears were streaming down her face. "For what I am about to reveal, for the secret I have kept not out of loyalty to you, but out of my own ambition and spite." My blood ran cold. "What secret?" She looked up at me, and the anguish in her eyes seemed real. "I know about your plans to marry Marcus Antonius, Maryamun, I should say. Word has leaked from the council, as such things always do, and I know why you're rushing the ceremony, doing it during the festival when opposition will be muted by celebration and religious fervor. Get to the point, Berenice."
The point is that Ptolemy Keraunos knows too. He's not in exile. He never left Alexandria. He's been hiding in the foreign quarter, protected by Roman merchants who support his claim to the throne. And he's planning something tomorrow, something that will turn your wedding into a disaster. I stood up, fury and fear warring inside me. What is he planning? Tell me everything now. I don't know the details, Berenice said, and I believed her. But I know he's gathered armed men, and I know he plans to strike during the ceremony. He means to kill you, kill Meriamun, and claim the throne in the chaos that follows. He has support from certain Roman senators who want a puppet king, and from Egyptian traditionalists who are outraged at the idea of you marrying a foreign commoner. Why tell me this now? I demanded. What do you gain from warning me? She stood, meeting my eyes directly. Because I have been a fool and a coward, cousin. I have let ambition poison my judgment. I have stood by while others plotted against you, thinking I could simply inherit whatever pieces remained after you fell. But watching you these past weeks, watching your courage, your determination to be both a strong queen and a woman in love, I have been shamed. You are twice the ruler I would ever be, and you deserve better than to be murdered on what should be the happiest day of your life.
I wanted to believe her. Gods, I wanted to believe that my cousin had finally chosen loyalty over ambition. But I had been betrayed too many times to trust easily. If you're lying to me, I said softly, if this is some elaborate trap, I will destroy you utterly. Is that clear? It's clear, she said, and I accept that risk. All I ask is that when this is over, when you have defeated Keraunos and secured your throne and married the man you love, you remember that I tried, finally, to do the right thing. I called Apollodorus immediately. Within the hour, my most trusted guards were scouring the foreign quarter, searching for any sign of Keraunos and his conspirators. They found him in a warehouse owned by the same Roman company that had sheltered Lysander's secret meetings. A nest of vipers that had been hiding in plain sight. The raid was swift and brutal. Apollodorus led personally, smashing through doors, overwhelming the guards Keraunos had hired. They found weapons stockpiled for tomorrow's attack, found maps of the temple showing planned approach routes, found a list of targets with my name and Marcus's, Miriam's, at the top. Keraunos himself fought like a cornered animal, killing 2 of my guards before Apollodorus disarmed him. They brought him to the palace in chains, bleeding from a dozen wounds, but alive. I had him thrown into the deepest cell, the one reserved for the worst traitors. This time, there would be no mercy, no strategic forgiveness. He had plotted to murder me on my wedding day, and for that, he would die. But first, I needed to know who else was involved. I went down to the cells myself, with Apollodorus and Miriam flanking me. The dungeon was ancient, carved from the living rock beneath the palace, lit only by torches that cast monstrous shadows on the damp walls. Keraunos looked up as I entered his cell. His face was bruised and bloody, but his eyes still held defiance. Come to gloat, cousin? Come to see your enemy in chains? I've come for names, I said coldly. Who else is part of this? Which Roman senators? Which Egyptian nobles? You will tell me everything, or I will have Apollodorus extract the information in ways that will make you beg for death. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You think I fear torture? I fear living under your rule more. Egypt needs a strong king, not a lovesick girl playing at being pharaoh. Miriam stepped forward before I could respond. You call her weak because she feels love? Because she has the courage to be human as well as divine? I have seen her outmaneuver you and all your conspirators. I have seen her turn your own weapons against you. She has more strength in her smallest finger than you have in your entire treacherous body. Keraunos spat at his feet. A Roman lapdog defending his Egyptian master. You're not even a real man. You're a trained pet, valued only for your tricks with languages. I saw Miriam's hands clench into fists, saw the rage building in him,
but he controlled it with visible effort. He turned to me and said quietly, "My love, don't let him provoke you. He's already beaten. He just wants to hurt you one more time before he dies." He was right, of course. Keraunos had nothing left except spite, and I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "Very well, then," I said to Apollodorus. "See what you can learn from him. Use whatever methods you deem necessary. Tomorrow is my wedding day, and I will not have it ruined by wondering who else might be planning an attack." We left the dungeon and returned to the upper levels of the palace. Dawn was breaking over Alexandria, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In a few hours, the festival would begin. In one day, I would marry the man I love and prove to the world that a queen could be both strong and human. But as I stood on my balcony watching the sunrise with Miriam's hand in mine, I felt a strange unease. Something about Keraunos' defiance bothered me. He had been too confident, too willing to accept his fate. It felt like he knew something we didn't, like this whole thing was somehow going according to a plan we hadn't yet uncovered. "What's wrong?" Miriam asked, reading my expression with the ease of someone who knew me too well. "I don't know," I admitted. "Something feels incomplete. Keraunos is beaten, his conspiracy exposed, his allies scattered. We should have won, so why do I feel like the real battle hasn't even started yet?" I didn't know it then, but my instincts were correct. The real crisis, the true test that Iset-Noset had prophesied, was still to come. And when it arrived, it would force me to make a choice that would define not just my reign, but the entire future of Egypt. The festival of Isis dawned clear and bright, as if the goddess herself blessed the day. The streets of Alexandria were packed with pilgrims who had traveled from every corner of Egypt and beyond. The air was thick with incense and the sound of thousands of voices raised in hymns and prayers. Flower petals carpeted the roads, and banners in the sacred colors of Isis, blue and white and gold, hung from every building. I spent the morning in ritual preparation, following the ancient customs that had been observed for thousands of years before me. I bathed in water blessed by the priests, mixed with lotus oil and myrrh. Charmian helped me dress in the wedding garments, a gown of the finest white linen, so sheer it seemed woven from moonlight, with an overlay of gold thread that caught the light with every movement. Over this went the traditional jewelry, a collar of lapis lazuli and turquoise, golden bands around my upper arms shaped like serpents, and a crown that combined the symbols of both Isis and Hathor, the two goddesses of love and power.
"You look like a goddess yourself," Charmian said, her eyes bright with tears. "I never thought I would see you this happy." "I never thought I would be," I admitted, looking at my reflection in the polished bronze mirror. For once, the woman looking back at me seemed complete, not just a queen or just a woman, but both together, integrated and whole. There was a knock at the door, and Apollodorus entered with a grave expression that immediately set my nerves on edge. "Your Majesty, there's been a development. Senator Marcellus has arrived from Rome with an urgent message from the Senate. He demands an immediate audience before the ceremony begins." My heart sank. This was it. The crisis I had been dreading. Rome had learned of my plans and was moving to stop them. "Bring him to the small audience chamber, and send for Meriamun. If Rome has objections to our marriage, he has a right to hear them directly." The small audience chamber was less intimidating than the great throne room, but still impressive. Walls painted with scenes of pharaohs receiving tribute from foreign lands, a reminder that Egypt had been great when Rome was nothing. I sat in a gilded chair, Meriamun standing to my right, Apollodorus to my left. Berenice was there too, at my request. After her warning about Keraunos,
I felt she had earned the right to be present for important matters of state. Senator Marcellus entered, and I immediately saw that something was wrong. He looked older than when I'd last seen him, his face drawn with stress. Behind him came 3 other Romans I didn't recognize, senators judging by their togas and bearing. They had the hard eyes of men accustomed to wielding power and expecting obedience. "Your Majesty," Marcellus began, without preamble, "I wish I came bearing congratulations on your wedding day. Instead, I must deliver a message from the Senate that will, I fear, change everything." "Speak plainly, Senator," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my foot was racing. One of the other senators stepped forward, a tall man with iron-gray hair and the calculating expression of a born politician. "I am Lucius Cornelius Sylla, sent by the Senate to address a matter of grave concern. We have learned that you plan to marry a Roman citizen, one Marcus Antonius Silvanus, thereby creating potential complications in our relationship with Egypt." "He is no longer a Roman citizen," I said firmly. "He has undergone the sacred rites of adoption into the royal house. He is now Meriamun, as Egyptian as I am, and Rome has no claim on him." "That's where you're wrong, Your Majesty," Sylla said, and there was something almost gleeful in his tone. "Marcus Antonius Silvanus is not merely a citizen. He is a patrician, descended from one of Rome's oldest families. His father may have been a merchant, but his mother was from the gens Antonia, which means he has obligations to Rome that supersede any Egyptian rituals or ceremonies." I looked at Meriamun and saw shock on his face. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "My mother died when I was so young, and my father never spoke of her family. He said they had disowned her for marrying beneath her station." "They did," Sylla interrupting, "but blood is blood, and the Senate has determined that you, Marcus Antonius, have a duty to Rome. We are prepared to offer you a position of considerable importance, ambassador to Egypt with authority over all Roman commercial interests in Alexandria. You would be wealthy, powerful, honored. All you have to do is renounce this foolish marriage and accept your rightful place in Roman society." The silence that followed was absolute. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. This was brilliant strategy on Rome's part. They couldn't directly order me not to marry Marcus without insulting Egypt's sovereignty. But they could appeal to his Roman identity, his duty to his mother's family, his potential for advancement in their system. "And if I refuse?" Meriamun asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Sylla's expression hardened. "Then we would be forced to consider you a traitor to Rome. Your property in Pompeii would be confiscated. Any Romans who dealt with you would face sanctions, and most importantly, the Senate would reconsider our current friendly relationship with Egypt. We might decide that a queen who marries a Roman traitor is not someone we can trust with the security of our grain supply." There it was, the threat underlying everything. If I married Meriamun, Rome would have the excuse they needed to justify intervention in Egypt. They would claim I had compromised Roman interests, allied myself with a traitor, proven myself unreliable. The invasion I had been working so hard to prevent would become inevitable. I looked at Meriamun and saw the anguish in his eyes. He understood what was at stake. If we married, we doomed Egypt. If we didn't, we lost each other. It was the choice Isitnofret had prophesied: love or duty, heart or crown. happiness or responsibility. Give us a moment, I said to the senators. This is not a decision to be made hastily. Of course, Scylla said with false politeness. But, Your Majesty, the ceremony is scheduled to begin within an hour. The crowds are gathering at the temple. You don't have much time. They left, and I sat there feeling as if the world was collapsing around me. Berenice spoke first, her voice surprisingly gentle. You know what you have to do, cousin. Egypt must come first. It always has. It always will. No, Meriamun said firmly. No, Cleopatra. You are not sacrificing our happiness for politics. There has to be another way. There isn't, I said, and my voice broke on the words. Don't you see? This is exactly what Keraunos was counting on. He didn't need to succeed in killing us. He just needed to get word to Rome about our plans. Give them time to prepare this ultimatum. He knew Rome would do what he couldn't, force us apart by making our love a weapon against Egypt.
Then we'll fight, Meriamun insisted. We'll find allies, build support, show Rome that Egypt won't be bullied. And in the meantime, my people starve? I shot back. Rome controls access to the Mediterranean trade routes. They could blockade Alexandria, cut off our commerce, strangle our economy. I've spent my entire reign trying to keep Egypt strong and independent. I can't throw all of that away, can't let millions suffer just because I fell in love. Tears were streaming down my face now, all the control and composure I had maintained for so long finally shattering. Meriamun pulled me to him, and we held each other while I cried against his chest. I don't want to lose you, I whispered. I can't lose you. You're the only real thing in my life, the only person who makes me feel human and whole. Then don't lose me, he said, tilting my face up to look at him. Cleopatra, listen to me. We don't have to marry. We don't need a ceremony or legal recognition or public celebration. What matters is this. He pressed his hand over my heart. What we feel for each other. That's real regardless of what Rome says or what political necessities demand. You would give up everything? I asked. The position, the status, the chance to be recognized as my consort? In a heartbeat, he said, without hesitation. I didn't fall in love with a queen. I fell in love with you, the woman who sneaks into libraries at dawn, who cries when she reads sad poetry, who carries the weight of a kingdom with grace and courage. I don't need titles or ceremonies to know that you're mine and I'm yours. Apollodorus cleared his throat. Majesty, there may be a middle path. What if you went through with the ceremony today? Not as a legal marriage, but as a religious one. In the eyes of Isis and the people of Egypt, you would be bound to Meriamun. But legally, officially, you would remain unmarried, in Roman eyes. Rome couldn't object to your religious practices, and Egypt would see that you honored your commitment. I looked at Berenice, expecting her to object, but instead she nodded slowly. It could work. The pharaohs have always had both official consorts and beloved companions. You could make Meriamun your chief advisor, give him quarters in the palace, keep him close without technically violating Roman demands. It's not perfect, but it lets you keep both your love and your kingdom. It was a compromise, and I hated compromises, but sometimes compromise was the only way to survive. I looked at Meriamun, searching his eyes for any sign of resentment or disappointment, but all I saw was love and determination. Are you sure? I asked him. This means you'll never be publicly recognized as my husband. Our children, if we have them, won't be legitimate heirs. You'll be forever in the shadows, politically invisible. I don't care about any of that, he interrupted. I care about you, about being with you, supporting you, loving you for as long as we both live. The rest is just details.
I kissed him then, not caring that Apollodorus and Berenice were watching, not caring about anything except the fact that I wasn't going to lose him. When we finally broke apart, I turned to my cousin with newfound respect. Thank you, Berenice, for warning me about Keraunos and for helping us find this solution. I have misjudged you. She smiled, a real smile, without calculation or hidden agenda. You haven't misjudged me, cousin. I was exactly as ambitious and treacherous as you thought. But watching you fight for love while still putting Egypt first, it reminded me of what really matters. Perhaps I can learn from your example. I called the Romans back and delivered my decision. Senator Sulla, I understand Rome's concerns. I have no wish to damage our relationship over matters of legal technicality. Therefore, I will not formally marry Marcus Antonius, Merriman. He will remain my advisor and translator, a valued member of my court, but nothing more in official terms. Sulla looked suspicious. And the ceremony scheduled for today will proceed as a religious celebration only, a blessing from Isis on my reign and my endeavors. Surely Rome does not presume to dictate how Egypt honors its gods. He couldn't argue with that without insulting Egyptian sovereignty far more directly than even Rome would dare to do. Very well, Your Majesty. I will report to the Senate that you have chosen wisdom over passion. I'm sure they will be pleased. After they left, I had to go out and address the crowds gathered at the temple. Thousands of people had come to witness what they thought would be a royal wedding, and I owed them an explanation. Merriman and I walked through the streets together, surrounded by guards, and when we reached the temple of Isis, I climbed the steps to address the multitude. People of Egypt, I called out, my voice carrying across the vast plaza, I stand before you as your queen and as a woman. Today was to be my wedding day, but forces beyond our control have intervened. Rome has demanded that I choose between my personal happiness and the welfare of our kingdom. The crowd stirred, murmuring with anger and disappointment. I choose Egypt, I continued. I choose you, all of you who depend on me to keep our land strong and free. But I also want you to know that love has not been defeated today. This man, I gestured to Merriman, holds my heart, and I hold his. We may not have Rome's blessing or legal recognition, but we have something more important. We have each other, and we have the blessing of Isis herself. Isitnotreft emerged from the temple, resplendent in her white robes, carrying the sacred sistrum that produced its distinctive rattling sound as she shook it. The goddess has spoken to me, she announced, her voice ringing with divine authority. She says that love sanctified by faith needs no mortal law. She says that a queen who chooses duty without abandoning love has passed the greatest test. She says that Egypt will prosper under a ruler who understands both strength and tenderness.
The high priestess descended the temple steps and placed her hands on both our heads, speaking the ancient words of blessing. And though it wasn't the wedding I had planned, though there would be no legal document or official recognition, in that moment I felt truly married, bound to marry Amun not by law, but by something deeper and more eternal. The crowd cheered, their earlier disappointment transforming into celebration. They understood, as I had hoped they would, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is find a way to honor both duty and love, even when the world tells you it's impossible. The festival of Isis continued through the night. There was music and dancing, feasting and joy. Maryamun and I moved through the crowds together, accepting congratulations and blessings, feeling more married than any ceremony could have made us. And when the moon rose full and bright over Alexandria, we slipped away to the palace gardens, to the lotus pool where this had all begun. "No regrets?" he asked, pulling me close. "1,000 regrets," I admitted. "I regret that we can't have the life we wanted, that our children won't bear your name officially, that you'll never be recognized as the remarkable man you are. But I don't regret loving you. and I don't regret choosing a path that keeps us together. That at least feels right. Then we'll make it enough. We'll build a life in the margins and shadows, and it will be more real than anything lived in the full light of public approval. And we did. In the weeks and months that followed, Mariamun became indispensable to my court, not as a consort, but as my most trusted advisor. We worked together daily on matters of state, and at night, when the palace slept, he came to my chambers and we were simply two people in love, shut away from the pressures of politics and duty. I never had cause to doubt his loyalty or his love. When I bore our first child, a daughter with my dark eyes and his beautiful smile, Rome could say nothing, because officially she was just the queen's child, father unacknowledged. But Egypt knew. The people saw Mariamun's devotion, his constant presence at my side, and they loved him as they loved me. Berenice became my staunchest ally, having learned that supporting a strong queen was better than scheming for a throne she was never suited to hold. Apollodorus remained my shield and protector, and Charmian my dearest friend. Together, we built something remarkable, a court that valued both wisdom and love, strength and compassion, tradition and innovation. The threats didn't disappear. There were always conspiracies to uncover, enemies to outmaneuver, difficult decisions to make. But I faced them all with Mariamun at my side, and that made every challenge bearable. He was my anchor in storms, my light in darkness, my reminder that being human was not weakness, but the source of my greatest strength. Years later, when historians would write about my reign, they would mention many things: the political alliances I forged, the economic prosperity I maintained, the cultural renaissance that flourished under my rule. Some would mention my relationship with Mariamun, usually dismissively, as evidence of feminine weakness or poor judgment. But I know the truth, and I carry it in my heart like a sacred flame. I know that the choice I made that day, to keep both my throne and my love, to refuse the false dichotomy between duty and happiness, was the most important decision of my reign. It taught me that true strength comes not from denying your humanity, but from embracing it fully, from being willing to fight for joy even when the world tells you to settle for merely surviving. And on quiet evenings, when Mariamun and I sit together watching our children play in the palace gardens, I think about that young woman I was, so afraid of love, so certain that being queen meant being alone. I wish I could tell her what I know now, that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave enough to be vulnerable, that the heart is not the enemy of the crown, but its greatest ally, that a queen who loves deeply rules most wisely because she understands what truly matters. The lotus flowers bloom eternal in the pools of Isis, and somewhere in their perfumed shadows I can hear the goddess laughing, pleased, I think, that I finally learned the lesson she had been trying to teach me all along, that love and power are not opposites but partners in the eternal dance of life, that a woman can be both a queen and wholly human, that sometimes the greatest political victory is simply refusing to sacrifice your soul for your throne. I am Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, beloved of Isis, chosen by the gods to rule, but I am also simply a woman who fell in love, who fought for that love, and who learned that the heart can indeed defeat politics when you're brave enough to believe it possible. And that, in the end, is a story worth telling, a reminder to all who come after that we need not choose between who we are and who we must be, that we can hold both the crown and the heart, that love is not weakness, but the greatest strength any ruler can possess. The sun sets over Alexandria, painting the harbor gold and crimson, and I stand on my balcony with Mariamun's hand in mine, watching another day end
and feeling grateful beyond measure for every moment, every challenge, every joy that brought us to this place. The story continues, as all stories do. There will be more challenges ahead, more enemies to face, more impossible choices to navigate. But we will face them together, and that makes all the difference. In the end, I showed that the heart can indeed conquer politics, not by defeating it, but by transforming it, by proving that a ruler who loves deeply can rule wisely, that strength and tenderness are not opposites, but complements, that the truest victory is staying true to yourself while serving something greater than yourself. This is my story. This is my truth, and I tell it not as a cautionary tale or a simple romance, but as evidence that even in the brutal world of power and politics, love can find a way. Not easily, not without sacrifice, but genuinely and completely. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson any queen, or any person, can learn.